My name is Woody Kingman, and I am honored to represent the Blake Alumni Board and the Office of Institutional Advancement, which sponsors these breakfasts. Thanks again for joining us today, and I hope you'll join us for more of our lineup this spring. In February, we'll hear from Blake parent Ty Coleman, who teaches writing and literature at the Minneapolis Community and Technical College, and where last year she received the MinSkew Systems Outstanding Educator Award. And in March, we'll hear from hedge fund manager and Blake parent Andy Redley. And in April, Douglas Gayetin will be here as part of the Philip Otis Environmental Authors Program. Doug is an artist, filmmaker, writer, photographer, and author of the book Local, The New Face of Food and Farming in America. It seems like we've kind of got a theme going. So, let me get on to today, where we have the privilege of hearing from Michelle Horovitz. After graduating from Blake in 1998, Michelle went on to graduate from the University of Pennsylvania and then the University of Minnesota Law School. She then practiced law as an assistant public defender in Miami-Dade County for 4 years, but having worked at Lord Fletcher's and Maynard's on Lake Minnetonka in her youth, the call of the restaurant business took her out of the courtroom and into the kitchen. Moving back to Minneapolis with her husband Adam and their son Alden, who is a current kindergartner across the courtyard here, Michelle brought her two interests together by co-founding Appetite for Change. AFC's website says it best. We are committed to using food as a vehicle for social change. We believe when families reclaim the kitchen as a place to bond with and educate their children, communities become stronger and more equipped for the struggles of daily life. So here to talk to us about being hungry for food justice, where agriculture, cooking, and social change intersect, is Blake's own Michelle Horovitz.
Thank you, Woody. Really impressive introduction. Probably the best I've ever seen. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks to Sarah and Becky for inviting me here, and thank you to all of you for coming out on a blistery January morning. I am going to just dive right in. Those in the room, a couple of you who know me, know that I don't normally read from a script, but I'm going to do that a little bit, and then I'm going to go off my presentation. So many of us are familiar with the food movement, categorized by local and organic foods, farmers markets, co-ops, CSAs, and other avenues for supporting local farmers, and the farm-to-table approach, building a local food system. The food movement advocates for people eating more whole foods locally and organically grown in a way that doesn't exploit the people who grow, pick, process, sell, and consume the food. Michael Pollan has said, "Don't eat anything that our great-grandmothers wouldn't recognize as food." But that ignores the vast differences in our great-grandmothers' lived social and economic experiences. Some were enslaved, brought across the ocean, and forced to eat scraps from the master's table. Others were put into boarding schools and taught to despise culturally traditional foods. And others who immigrated here, like many of my ancestors, may not have been able to access the traditional foods inherent to their culture. Hence, and thankfully, the birth of many Jewish-owned restaurants like the traditional delicatessen. The food movement and the community food groups that work within the movement are dominated by white, middle-upper-class people, and the movement itself often ignores the lived experiences, historical trauma, and systematic oppressions associated with food. How many of you have heard the term food justice? Great. So, for those of you who don't, what is food justice? The idea that access to culturally relevant foods and the ability to produce foods for one's own community is a basic human right. One that most often low-income communities of color are cut off from through policies that have taken their ability to own and manage land for food production and exploited them as farm workers or industrial food processors. More importantly, the laws and policies we operate under tend to hamper people of color and low-income families' ability to access fresh, local, and culturally relevant foods in their own communities. Often we take a needs-based or deficit-based approach to, or a charitable food model by providing resources and volunteer hours so that people can get emergency food aid, access food shelves, free and reduced lunch and breakfast programs through schools, and other band-aids that don't necessarily get at the root causes of food insecurity. Now, I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but I will talk today about a more holistic approach. An area that is near and dear to my heart is North Minneapolis, because it's where my grandparents immigrated to and where my father and his sisters were raised. I feel that if it weren't for the tough conditions my family overcame there, I wouldn't have been so privileged to have the education here at Blake and upbringing that has allowed me to do this work. Minneapolis, many of you may know, was one of the most anti-Semitic places in the country. Restrictive covenants prevented Jews from purchasing a home in most areas of town. You actually couldn't purchase a home in certain areas from someone who had a restrictive covenant, even if they didn't care whether you were a Jew. Forced to live in North Minneapolis. As more black immigrants from the South and other cities came to Minnesota, they too were relegated to the poorest area of Minneapolis, the north side. White flight began in North Minneapolis after World War II, as it did in most cities, and Jewish out-migration was a big part of that. Jewish business owners no longer lived in the community, and some in the black community saw Jews as just white folks. In 1967, after decades of relative harmony where Jews and blacks lived together, racial tension nationally was rising, and the riots on Clements Avenue targeting Jewish businesses drove the few Jews who remained out to the suburbs. My uncle, Bernie Horovitz, was one of those business owners. He opened his operation, Park Deli in St. Louis Park, rather than the north side. It operated from 1947 as Park Delicatessen and then reopened as Bernie's in 1959 and closed the year after I was born. Some of you in the room may remember Bernie's, famous for his pickles and his corned beef. Actually had people ask me for the recipe. My parents met there, my dad slicing meat behind the counter and my mom waiting tables. She asked him out, by the way. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. You could say I have restaurant and food in my blood. When my parents married in 1968, they settled in St. Louis Park and then moved west to Minnetonka. When my mom took a job at the lower school as a lower school administrator at Blake, my sister and brother switched from Groveland to Blake, and I went here from kindergarten through 12th grade. So, after Blake, I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I studied bioethics, Spanish, and theater. I wanted to go to culinary school. I'd always had a passion for food. As Woody mentioned, I kind of worked the restaurant circuit, Sunsets, Maynard's, Bayside, and Lord Fletcher's, all in the front of the house, serving, waiting tables, but I always had a passion for cooking. As a third child with two working parents and busy after-school activities, I often fended for myself and just kind of taught myself how to cook. So going to culinary school, moving to New York City, waiting tables, and sharing a room in Manhattan wasn't the path that I think anyone had expected, and I think I succumbed to sort of this societal pressure to pursue something a little bit more prestigious. So I pursued my passion for social justice and went to law school, which I wouldn't give up for a second. The education was amazing. The University of Minnesota Law School is a great institution, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. I got interested in social justice and public interest law. I was a clinic director for the prosecution clinic, realized that that side of the courtroom wasn't a good fit for me, and I then did the defense clinic. And I moved to Miami to pursue a career as a public defender. I worked in the juvenile division, misdemeanors, and felonies. It was an eye-opening experience. It was very difficult, very challenging. The average career of a public defender is 3 years, although I was fortunate to work in an office with many career public defenders that I learned from and trained from. I took well to litigation. I was good at it, but I was missing that passion that I had for cooking. And I knew, because I didn't have children, that it was kind of now or never. So I took a leave of absence from the public defender's office. I had met my mentor, Michelle Horovitz, who's father, David Bernstein, actually a native of St. Paul. She was getting a pedicure, and I was sitting next to her in Miami. And I recognized her, and I told her my story, and she thought it was interesting, and said, "Why are you leaving your career as a lawyer to be a cook?" And I said, "Well, I don't make any more money than I would as a cook." Actually, as a line cook per hour, I made more than I did as a public defender. But I told her my goals, and she discouraged me from going to culinary school so that I could probably get what I was looking for by just staging or apprenticing in restaurants. At the time, I was doing some catering on the side, and she offered to let me come and apprentice in her kitchen. So I worked for 3 months, 9 to 5 for free. That was much more economical than going to culinary school. It's really expensive for a very short period of time. And when they realized that they weren't getting rid of me, they decided they had to hire me. So I worked as a line cook, an assistant to the pastry chef, and a prep cook. So then I got pregnant with my first child, and working in that kitchen environment wasn't the easiest pregnant, so I did go back to the public defender's office for the remainder of my pregnancy. I took maternity leave, and we decided to move back to Minneapolis. At that time, I was really looking for a way to combine my passions for food and racial and social justice. I started doing research about urban farming, healthy eating for kids, food workers' issues, food access, and all the different components of the spectrum of food justice. I was a volunteer chef instructor at a program at the University of Minnesota called Cooking Matters, and I really wanted to do something on the north side. I feel really viscerally connected to the community. My grandmother lived there for 45 years, and although I didn't grow up there, I spent a lot of time hearing about and visiting the north side and seeing the drastic differences between the community in North Minneapolis and the community that I was raised in. I was teaching cooking classes to young moms and people with really little children. I kind of had my blinders on. I had a toddler, and I thought that was sort of the best route to what I was interested in. And I met Princess Titus and Latasha Powell, who were the co-founders of Appetite for Change. We decided to do something a little different in North Minneapolis when we started the organization. Rather than coming into a community like North Minneapolis, they're both long-term residents, so that was already different, that it was a group of the 3 of us. But rather than me coming in sort of with like a white savior complex and saying, I know what's going to work for your community and I'm going to save you or I'm going to help you be better people, we really went in and took a different approach. We knew that there was a lot of assets in the community, that people had a lot of knowledge, a lot of cultural traditions around food, and we decided to do what a lot of organizations don't do when they get started, which is actually ask the community members that they're planning on serving what it is that they would like to get out of a program. And so Community Cooks was that vehicle, and we had over 130 families come together in 8 cooking workshops. We broke up into groups, we cooked different recipes at each station, and then we had facilitated dialogues that were led by Tasha, Princess, and other members of the community, not led by me, to ask community members what the barriers were, what the challenges were, and what they wanted to see in the program. We put butcher paper up on the wall, we put the questions up, people were able to write their answers. If they weren't comfortable speaking in a small group, they could answer this way. And we collated all the information and formed Appetite for Change. So our mission is to use food as a tool to build health, wealth, and social change. And one of our core values is community ownership. So this is a picture of us at our grand opening of Breaking Bread Cafe, which is one of our social enterprises I'll talk about a little bit later. And this is who we are. We are not the Charlie's Angels, although we were pretending to be. But that is Princess. She's our Director of Education and Training. Tasha is our Director of Programming, and that's me. And we have a Director of Operations, Daryl Lindsay. You can see him, he's the lazy one sitting in the back, directing operations. We have an Executive Chef, Michelle Cunningham. She runs the cafe. She prefers Executive Chef. Her title is actually Director of Social Enterprise. as most chefs want to be chefs. And then we have youth leaders that have been with us since the beginning, Jesse and Latasia, and they help with our youth employment and training program. So, you might be asking, what is the problem? Well, the problem is pretty complex. It has a lot of different layers, but North Minneapolis often gets called a food desert. It's not actually a food desert, it's a food swamp. Food deserts means there's no place to get food. There's a lot of places to get food on West Broadway and in North Minneapolis. It just all happens to be not so healthy. So there's a lack of healthy food choices, which leads to a lot of different issues, including health disparities, economic disparities, and the people who are most affected are the majority of the community, which is the African American community. The median income in North Minneapolis for African Americans, the median is $29,000. And that's actually an average of $8,000. A study was done that for every $8,000 in median income, you lose 1 year of life expectancy. The people who are most affected by this are the youth. North Minneapolis is made up of 50% of children under the age of 18. So the solution is as holistic and multi-pronged as the problem. Real food access is part of it, so we are working on that. Engagement, there's all these young people, we have to get them engaged in the movement. Education and training on all different levels, individuals, businesses, community. Small business incubation, so creating economic opportunities for the community, which leads to more youth jobs. And it also builds awareness so that policy and advocacy can take place so that we can actually change the systems and environments and policies that affect.
Welcome to Appetite for Change, a community-led organization in North Minneapolis, which is an area filled with fast and junk food options. Our mission, to use food as a tool to build health, wealth, and social change. How do we do this? Our Community Cooks program brings people together to cook, eat, learn, and talk about the change we want to see in our community. These workshops are free. We build urban farms and provide opportunities for creating a community-owned food system. This allows our youth leaders to advocate for food-based policy change. So, how do we pay for this? Like most nonprofits, we rely on grants, government contracts, and individual donors. But this isn't the most sustainable model. So we look to earn income strategies. Social enterprise. Kindred Kitchen is one of our social enterprise programs. A shared commissary kitchen that supports food trucks, caterers, and value-added producers who rent kitchen time to operate and grow their small businesses. Our sister enterprise next door is Breaking Bread, a fast casual cafe and catering service offering made-from-scratch comfort foods, while training youth in culinary arts and food service. Revenue generated from these activities is reinvested back into our parent organization, Appetite for Change. This allows us to train and employ more young people. The youth in our program facilitate workshops through fee-for-service contracts with groups who can pay, and they grow and aggregate food as part of an urban growers cooperative that then sells that produce to the cafe and other local businesses like restaurants, corner stores, and even our own Kindred Kitchen tenants. Through our holistic closed-loop system, we address the lack of real food access, build capacity and educate our peers. We are creating a good food movement while employing residents and keeping more money in our community. What change are you hungry for?
It looks a lot more complicated than it is. The market opportunity, this is West Broadway. There's corner stores, there's Burger King, there's Wings and Things, McDonald's, Taco Bell, Little Caesars, Popeyes, Wendy's too, one grocery store, then there's all these nonprofits, the Minneapolis Public School headquarters is right next to us, tons of foot traffic, tons of people that live near the community, it's a residential area, and there's over $3 million a year of food leakage, meaning people have to leave the community to spend money on food. So it not only creates a health problem, but it's also leaking money out of the community. So we decided to try to capture some of that market, but also create a space where small food entrepreneurs could incubate. So Breaking Bread and Kinder Kitchen are located right on West Broadway on Fremont and West Broadway across from Shiloh Temple, if you're familiar with the area. So the triple bottom line concept is, I think it's known for more of a traditional way, but we call it social by selling. The food and the products that we're putting out into the community are socially good. It's social by sourcing. So this is a shot of our farmers market. So local produce, local products. Social by sourcing means that we try to source as much as we can from the food that we grow or from other local growers, and then we source our people or our labor from those in the community that need jobs. We also provide opportunities for our food entrepreneurs at Kinder Kitchen to put their products in the cafe. And then social by sharing is the triple bottom line, which is that we reinvest all of the income generated by these activities back into the organization. And for you lawyers in the room, it's related business income because it's related to our mission, so it's non-taxable. That's the beauty of it. Although we don't pay property taxes directly, we do pay to our landlord, who is also a late parent, Stu Ackerberg, which kudos to Stu. Without him, our move into Kinder Kitchen and taking over that existing business would not have happened. So let's see, just a couple more slides. So these are some of the social impacts that we measure: number of workshops, number of community members fed. It wasn't a very exciting slide anyway. Number of gardens started, number of urban farmers supported, number of youth employed, and so on and so forth. Now it's on an automatic loop. Well, this is some of our press. That picture before was a picture of the storefront of Breaking Bread Cafe. Our logo was designed by one of our youth, which then we partnered with Juxtaposition Arts, and they digitized it, and so it was kind of a youth in the community project. This is some of the press we've gotten for the cafe and the work that we're doing. This thing doesn't like me very much, Adam. I think that I don't have much more. There's a slide of our menu. There we go. Yep. That's it. That's all I have. Thank you for listening.
I'm sure there's some questions for Michelle. We've got plenty of time, so if anyone wants to know something about food that we haven't really fired.
How does your model work in the winter?
That is a really good question. That's one of the things we're trying to work on in our policy initiatives as far as season extension. So working to get more resources from the state to not only recognize urban agriculture as a piece of our agricultural system in Minnesota, but also to put resources towards season extension. So we do start our seedlings inside. We are exploring different models. There's some really innovative approaches like underground farms that are in the ground. It captures the sunlight and keeps the heat in. We're going to be erecting a hoop house this year to be able to extend our season a little bit, but it is definitely a challenge. Yeah.
You have a very compelling mission. You have a room full of 150 people. What's your call to action?
Well, I have a few calls to action. Thank you. One is there's a campaign out there right now called Plate of the Union. It's being put forth by a coalition of a few different national organizations. One is Food Policy Action, and one is the Union of Concerned Scientists, and then a group called HEAL, which I'm blanking on the acronyms, but it's Healthy Environment and Food. And the plate of the union is basically a call to whoever the next president is, regardless of political party, to really take a lead, and to our legislatures to take the lead on creating a national food policy. Many of you who may be knowledgeable about the Farm Bill and how agricultural subsidies work, it doesn't create a system that supports local farmers, and it really drives a lot of the resources into larger corporate agriculture, inhumane practices, both towards the animals and towards the people that work in the system. So I would encourage people to hop online and look at that. We are always interested in catering, and we do corporate events, we do parties, we've actually done bar mitzvah. So Breaking Bread Cafe and Catering, breakingbreadfoods.com. So another call to action is to come to the cafe. We have Wi-Fi. I encourage everyone to not be afraid of North Minneapolis. I know that in recent months there's been a lot of news media stories about the Jamar Clark incident and the occupation of the 4th Precinct. We were a part of that in a way. We brought coffee, we donated supplies, we were supportive of the folks who were out there. It's reminiscent of what was happening on Plymouth Avenue in 1967, and there was actually an article in the Star Tribune comparing the two. So I would encourage people to think more open-mindedly about North Minneapolis. It's not a scary place. If I can go there and feel comfortable walking down the street every day, I think any of you could as well. So come to Breaking Bread and eat, and check out our catering menu. We also do our community cooks workshops for corporate and social groups. So if you have a group of people that like to cook or want to have a unique social experience, we can come to you, you can come to the cafe. The workshop is really hands-on. There's some facilitated dialogue. It's led by the youth that we work with, so it's a really unique opportunity to engage, not just come and volunteer and walk away feeling, good that you served a community, but coming and really authentically engaging and actually learning from the people that you're typically serving. And I found that people like those in this room that come and engage with us actually walk away learning more than the young people and the people in the community may have learned from the folks outside the community. We have not done a really great job of soliciting individuals who are interested in supporting our work. Some of you in the room have supported us since the beginning. I've got my honorary family over there in the corner. My parents have a decent excuse, they're in Florida, but my mom worked here for 25 years, as many of you may know. It was really fun when she was giving my friends yellow slips and pink slips at the lower school, but and when I went to middle school, and everybody from the Blake campus knew exactly who I was, and not for the greatest reason. But no, many of her former colleagues have been very supportive. So we rely mostly, our earned revenue strategies are growing. This year we'll do, last year, it's already January. Last year we did 30% earned revenue of our total budget. Our goal is to be 50% earned revenue by 2020, so that we can just be more sustainable and not have to go out and beg people for money. But if you are interested in supporting, we always want to get the word out. We get mostly foundation grants and government contracts. We're so busy doing the work, and we have a development team of one. So I'm super jealous of the Blake School, because you guys have a superstar team that does development. But yeah, I don't have a lot of time to get out there and get the message out. So tell people about us, go to our website, go to the Plate of the Union website. Those would be my calls to action. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could speak to, you mentioned them, if there's any programs or direct connection within those communities.
Absolutely. Our 2015 data, we served about 7% of our community served was Native American. There's a really growing Native American community, Dakota and Lakota mostly in North Minneapolis. There are a ton of programs and organizations that are working within the Native communities. Dream of Wild Health is one. They're amazing. They're growing food. They're serving youth. They do similar work that we do, and that's an example of a culturally based approach. So, and an asset-based approach, and lifting up the traditional cultural foods, honoring those traditions, and bringing the young people who may be super disconnected, generations disconnected from their heritage, and reconnecting people to the land, to the environment, and to their traditions. And so, not to say that these approaches need to be segregated. I'm definitely trying to build more multiracial coalitions on the north side. We're part of a coalition called Northside Fresh, which is working with the mostly Hmong community and the Latino and Native communities, along with our organization, which is primarily a Black organization. I'm really the only leader that's not from the African American community. So trying to take a culturally specific approach, but then meld those together is kind of the goal. Yeah.
If you're going to spend just a moment or two talking about how to reach out to various cultures, you were talking about that from a standpoint. You're also reaching out to various cultures in different ways. If I hear you correctly, it's an enormous benefit to us all. What I'm interested in is how do you reach out and then feel the benefit that is developing over time. And that would be the best. Feel the benefit.
Thank you, I appreciate that, I agree with you. Well, specifically in the Black community in North Minneapolis, because we are really community-based and we started out of the first 250 people that we talked to were 95% African American. And what we found is that we don't have to do a lot of reaching out because we are led by people in the community. And so youth find us because their friends, their cousins, their neighbors have been affiliated. They've come to a workshop, they've stopped by the cafe, they've driven past a garden. Princess likes to say, like she'll roll by those guys standing on the corner that, nobody in this room would ever stop and talk to, but even people in the community don't stop and talk to. And she'll roll down the window and be like, hey, what are you guys doing? Like, you want to help harvest some okra? And they're like, what? So it is a really grassroots approach within the African American community. How we reach out to other cultures, mostly through social media and through the relationships that we've developed with other organizations. A lot of times it's actually through funder convenings. So if we're at a Cargill Foundation convening or a Blue Cross Blue Shield convening, there's like a cohort of grantees that are all doing similar work and around health equity, around economic and food justice. And to your second point, we are doing a strategic plan right now because we've never had to. We've just been following the vision of the community. But now that we're like a real organization, I started teaching workshops by myself in 2011. I met Princess and Tasha at the end of that year, and we did our first community cooks in 2012. We moved into the building where Breaking Bread and Kindred Kitchen is in 2014, and we opened the cafe last year. So it's been a really wild, very fast ride with exponential growth, which is good because it shows that there's a demand in the community. But we just did, the dreaded SWOT analysis, and one of the strengths or opportunities is that our approach is very attractive to people because it's food. Everybody eats. It's like the one thing human beings across cultures, across religions, across communities, we all have to put food into our bodies. And most of us, regardless of our heritage, have pretty rich cultural traditions around food. And so it's something that we can connect with other people around, and therefore it lends itself to so many different areas. So first and foremost, the obvious health benefits. So what we put into our bodies, it improves our physical health, our mental health. Children are more prepared to learn in school. I mean, the fact that we're in a community where all of the kids that are here have probably not only eaten a good breakfast at home, but they're given a ridiculous lunch. I mean, I wish I could come and eat lunch every day here with my son. And so the nutritional value as far as educational success. And then on the sort of areas that we don't typically think of food impacting, it's more around economic development, community development. So the small food business incubation that we're doing, the building confidence in the community that this is a system that we can change, there are policies that we can impact, and really building more community ownership over not only what food choices are available, but also what money stays in the community and what jobs are created. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Time for one last question.
About 40% of food that is grown is wasted. And there are a couple organizations, DC, Central Kitchen, and LA Kitchen, that take donated food from farms, that aren't the perfect looking apple or whatever included produce. And they use that donated food and incorporate it into a business model that is similar.
Yep.
Have you thought about that as part of incorporating it into your business model?
Yeah, so Robert Egger, who's the founder of DC Central Kitchen, and he moved back to California and opened LA Kitchen. Their model is not only to take donated food, but then they also do the social enterprise. So they do culinary arts training for underserved communities. In DC, it's focused on re-entry, folks that are coming back from being incarcerated, and in LA, for LA Kitchen, it's youth aging out of foster care, and then seniors who are coming back into society from having been in prison. And he is like the guru. He's one of my mentors. Like, I really look up to him. We were in DC, we toured DC Central Kitchen, we were in LA for the Policy Lake Equity Summit this fall, and we met with him personally. He toured us around. So yes, yes, and yes, those are models that we aspire to. One of the slides that I didn't include is that we're sort of a rising star member of a network called Catalyst Kitchens, which is started out of Seattle through a similar program called Fair Start, and they have a whole bunch of members that we've been able to learn from. Homegirl Cafe in Los Angeles is part of a larger social enterprise called Homeboy Industries. Liberty's Kitchen and Cafe Reconcile in New Orleans. These are all models that we're looking at, and one of the challenges with that model is, yes, they're taking, so much food is thrown away and so much is wasted because as Americans, we go into the grocery store and we want to see that perfect bell pepper, no bruises, no blemishes. It has to be the perfect shape. And I do it too. I find myself like picking it up and like looking at it and pressing it. Is this the one I want? And it's like, there's a whole movement out there called ugly fruits and vegetables, which would be another call to action to look that up. So the seconds, or the grade B and grade C produce, there's a huge opportunity for that because farmers, so backing up, the challenge of the donated model is that usually the donated produce comes from large industrial farms. It's still being shipped from other countries or from California, so it's not necessarily helping the carbon footprint, but it is solving a really big issue of food waste. So some organizations, us included, are looking at taking that model and going more towards the local route, and so saying food gets wasted on every level. It gets wasted at restaurants, it gets wasted at local farms, it gets wasted at farmers markets, and how can we capture that local produce and not necessarily ask that it be donated, but maybe paying pennies on the dollar for the seconds, so that we also support the farmer, because we don't want to just ask producers to give their product away. But yes, we are, in all the things that we're doing, I think goal number one is to have a successful program, to have a sustainable break-even restaurant business, which any of you know that have worked in the restaurant industry, it's a really tough industry. Margins are really short, and we have built into our model a much higher labor cost because we are training young people and people in the community that don't maybe have the experience, and so it's part of our model that our labor cost is higher. We're never going to have a labor cost of 35–40%, and so getting our food costs down by paying a little bit less for those ugly fruits and vegetables is something we're really called food neophobia, and it is an actual condition, and it means fear of new foods. And we all have it as human beings, evolutionarily, because when we were hunting and gathering, we didn't want to eat a plant or a berry that we didn't recognize because it could be poisonous, right? And so as children, food neophobia is at its height between 2 and 7 years old. So I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so it's like real fun in my house. But I think it starts with the parents, and it starts with being willing to, even though you might feel like you're wasting food, cook in smaller batches and introduce an item to your child more than you think. I think people say like, oh, it takes 3 times to, it takes 20 to 30 times sometimes if they don't immediately like it. And any of us that have small children or grandchildren will know that it could be the most delicious homemade mac and cheese with a bechamel cheese sauce that you slaved over, and you present it to them, and it's got breadcrumbs and it's baked in the oven, and they're like, what is this? Like, weird shaped noodles, I just want Kraft out of the box. Like, it tastes better than Kraft, but they don't recognize it as something that they're familiar with. So it's all about exposure and exposing kids not only at a really early age, but multiple times, and also modeling. We meet a lot of parents that will actually say, I don't eat fruits and vegetables, or like, I don't like fruits and vegetables. Well, first of all, I've never met someone who did not like any fruit or any vegetable. So there's probably a fruit or a vegetable that you can say you like. But parents who don't eat well have children who don't eat well. A lot of it has to do with what's available in our communities. So willing to bet that most people in this room, can go to a co-op or Byerly's or Whole Foods or whatever and get whatever they need. But like 40% of the community in North Minneapolis don't have access to vehicles, and there's one mainstream grocery store. So a lot of it is about environment. And then the last thing I'll say is, just making it fun. So if kids get involved in growing food, and even if it's just doing an herb garden in the backyard or on the terrace if you don't have a backyard, they feel ownership over the food, especially if, and like my 3-year-old loves to help make dinner. I mean, she gets up on the stool and I give her a butter knife and she cuts the cucumbers or the strawberries. They can mix, they can help measure and pour if you're baking. So really getting them engaged is important.
You kept us engaged. Thank you very much. Thank you again for joining us. Michelle can stick around for about another 15 minutes. If you have questions, please come up and talk to her. And also, please come back in February, March, April, May, and even in June. We've got a full plate, so hope you'll join us. Thanks much.